Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Sadly, most of them are the young officers. These are the ones that could be put into areas that they don't really want to be, given details that they don't really want to do, and they can be really made to feel very uncomfortable by their supervisors and by their bosses. But what the officers have is the power of discretion.
Yeah.
Which is the most powerful tool they have. If they don't have the grounds to believe that somebody is committing an offence, personally believe, they can just simply say, I don't see anything wrong. We cannot rely on the mainstream media because they are feeling everybody with fear. And it's that fear that is driving this whole process right now. But there are officers that genuinely believe in their oath to protect our citizens. And they will not take part in this. And that number is increasing.
Well, folks, I'm with Len Faul. He is the spokesman for Police on Guard. First of all, Glenn, what is Police on Guard?
Police on Guard is a group of, started as a group of active police officers, primarily in and around the Greater Toronto area, that recognise the incongruities between the emergency measures in Ontario and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And it put them in an untenable position because their oath is to uphold people's Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Absolutely.
And to administer the law impartially and fairly. And they cannot do that because of the difficulties placed with lockdown measures that clearly breach everybody's rights.
And tell me, Glenn, if they do abide by their conscience, if they do say to their sergeant or supervisor, look, I didn't sign up for this, are they reprimanded?
They could not be reprimanded in the sense that you'd have to prove that they've done something wrong. The greatest power that police officers have is what we call their power of discretion.
Okay.
They have to have probable grounds before they can issue a ticket or arrest somebody or disperse a crowd or whatever else they're going to do.
Yeah.
They have to have probable grounds. Each individual officer throughout the country is held entirely responsible for their own personal actions.
So is it safe to assume then, I mean, we can't get into the heads of people, obviously, Glenn, but when we've seen, I think, an overreach of policing, especially in Toronto, Yonge Dundas Square, the mayor has declared that a no-man's zone. Adam Skelly, back in late November, my goodness gracious, all the King's horses and all the King's men came to shut down that barbecue restaurant, and then Adam was sent the bill, $187,000 for the law enforcement costs. Are all those cops, are they gung-ho?
No, absolutely not. They're not. Most of them are horrified by what they're being told to do. Okay. And you'll notice that, sadly, most of them are the young officers. These are the ones that could be put into areas that they don't really want to be, given details that they don't really want to do. And they can be really made to feel very uncomfortable by their supervisors and by their bosses. But what the officers have is the power of discretion,
Yeah.
which is the most powerful tool they have. If they don't have the grounds to believe that somebody is committing an offence, personally believe, they can just simply say, I don't see anything wrong.
You know,
But they will be put into an untenable position.
well,
That's
I think that might be a career-limiting move these days. You know, there is an element of COVID Karenism in the police force. Glenn, speaking of Adam Skelly, I met at Adam Skelly's press conference the wife of a police officer. This is going back more than a month. And huge fans of our news organization. And what she told me is that at his division, I won't name it, half of the police are disgusted with the orders they're getting.
Yes.
The other half actually believe they're doing God's work. They actually think they're shutting down super spreader events.
Yes.
And there is actual division between the pro and con lockdown cops.
Yes.
Is this what you've come across too?
Yes, indeed, very much so. Again, it's to do with the mainstream media. We rely on the Rebel, for example, and the Druthers newspapers for the actual truth. We cannot rely on the mainstream media because they are feeling everybody with fear. And it's that fear that is driving this whole process right now. But there are officers that genuinely believe in their oath to protect our citizens. and they will not take part in this. And that number is increasing. Initially, it was just a few, but we're now starting to see we're almost at a tipping point. But it's not. Toronto is, I think, probably one of the worst places.
I agree.
And that was my police service. I was there for 32 years. I retired as an inspector. But we see other police services, for example, here in Ottawa. The Hill is policed by the Parliamentary Protective Services. They're the police for this area. Do you see them harassing anybody? Do you see them chasing anybody away?
Glenn, not only that, as a silver lining, a sign of hope, every parliamentary police officer I'm looking at right now isn't wearing a mask.
No, and that's the first time. At the last protest, they actually wore masks.
Okay.
But you'll also notice there's the Ottawa Police Service out on Wellington there. They will not come on the Hill unless they are asked to come on by Parliamentary Protective Services, but only to back them up. That's all. They won't come otherwise. They're there just in case.
Glenn, I guess to wrap this up, where do we go from here? You're saying we're coming up to a tipping point. What I would like to see personally in terms of law enforcement is what we saw last summer when it came to Black Lives Matter protesters. They bent the knee with the protesters, including the then chief of police for Toronto. Will we ever see one of these anti-lockdown protests where the cops en masse bend the knee and say, we're not assaulting anyone, we're not handcuffing anyone, we're not hauling anyone away for waving a Canadian flag, for quoting biblical passages, for denouncing communism on a sign? Will we ever see that, my friend?
I sincerely hope so. I really do. We're seeing it in Europe. We've seen that in several major cities in Europe, in Austria, in Romania, in Germany. We have seen exactly that in Holland just recently, the mass protests, and the police stood with the people. And that's what we need here. We need to see the police recognizing that they too are members of the public. They too are going to suffer as a result of this conspiracy, and they too are going to not have the opportunities for their children to come to events like this because the government will stomp all over their rights. And so we have to stand up, and we need to get more members of the public to realize this as well.
Well, Glenn, I really appreciate the work you're doing, and I appreciate your time today. And one last thing, if you ever come across an active police officer who wants to come on camera, we can disguise his identity, distort his voice, because I understand what can happen to him in the aftermath. I would love to interview that individual and get an active police officer's take on what's going on today.
I can arrange that.
Okay.
I can absolutely arrange that. Right now, all of our police officers have to have their identity secured.
Yes.
For obvious reasons.
Yes.
We've each entered into an agreement that we will keep their identities safe because we know darn well there's going to be reprisals as soon as their identities are known. No doubts about that whatsoever. But at the same time, you have to realize there are some very good police services across the country. The chief in Vancouver, for example, went public to say, we've looked at this situation and we don't see that this lockdown is going to serve any purpose other than create more harm than good. Yeah. And he was vilified by the media. The health authorities were all over him, but he stood firm. The brave man, he stood firm. At the same time, he said that the individual officers, they have their own discretion. The law is there. If they want to enforce it, it's up to them. But he's not going to make them do it.
I'm happy to hear that. I guess the only time there's a fiasco vis-a-vis the Vancouver Police Service is when the Vancouver Canucks fail to win a Stanley Cup and then the whole city goes to hell, right? But Glenn, that's not the police fault, of course. No. Glenn, thank you again. Please follow up with me with that brave officer, or even if it's more than one officer, I'd love that. I'd like to get him on camera, and good luck with your agenda.
Thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate it. And hang in there. I know you're going to be losing Facebook soon, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get kicked off Facebook as well, but we have our own website as well now, policeonguard.ca.
That's policeonguard.ca.
Yes, that's our website, which is linked to our Facebook account and Twitter and Instagram and all the other social media ones. So far, we haven't been kicked off, but if they can kick you off, they can certainly kick us off.
If they can deplatform the President of the United States, they can deplatform little old us. Glenn, thank you so much. Hey, folks, have you heard the news? YouTube has completely demonetized us. Yeah, 100%. Well, we're not bending the knee to big tech. If you can, please go to afteryoutube.com. That's afteryoutube.com, and find out alternative ways in which you can follow and support Rebel News.